Going into round 8 of the Sinquefield Cup, Levon Aronian led the field by a clear point. He played against Vishwanathan Anand. He played an interesting opening, sacked pawn, but Anand defended precisely in this game. Ended in a fairly short draw. That meant that the chasing pack had a chance to catch up a little bit of ground on Aronian. In particular, Magnus Carlsen, of course, who had a bitter defeat against Grishuk the day before. He played against Nakamura, Hikaru Nakamura, who in the past has a very poor record against Carlsen. And so this was maybe Carlsen's chance. After 18 moves, they reached this position. It was a Queen's Gambit declined. Carlsen played a bit of a side variation, obviously well prepared, and although this position has been seen before, Carlsen had clearly prepared some new idea here, and it rather caught out Nakamura. Previously, a6 has been played in this position, and that might well be a better move. It's a better chance of giving Black's queenside pawns greater stability. So, for example, this was a game between Moiseyenko and Akobian from Montreal 2009, and here you can see that Black's pawns have some kind of stability. It is still a little bit unpleasant for Black to defend. You can see that White's king is in the middle of the board and could well advance to support the D pawn. Black's king not so well placed at the side of the board, and this is rather the theme in this game, that this excellent centre pawn gives White more central control and shields the king beautifully. White simply has more active pieces. Bishop e6 was played by Nakamura. This certainly isn't as good as a6. The rook comes across, and you can see those white rooks want to swing across and put some pressure on these pawns, and this is already rather uncomfortable for Black. So the bishop attacks the rook. Now if that rook moves away straight away, then rook a1, and you can see that one of those pawns is going to fall. White's position is just perfect here. Black has no counterplay. So Nakamura tried a rather strange move, bishop a4. I mean, it's necessary in this position. So the rook moves across, and now the point is that after rook a1, Black can play b5. Now it's an odd move because it locks in the bishop at the side of the board. It does give Black some temporary security on the queen side. You could say it locks out White's rooks, but it is strange to have this bishop at the side of the board. And Carlsen exploited this quite well. First of all, bishop c6, you can see, these bishops look superb. Attacking the b5 pawn, that was defended. And now bishop b7. So Carlsen wants to force the a pawn forward and create a weakness on b5. Bishop d6 from Nakamura. Now if that's taken, then the rook defends the a pawn. So Carlsen nudged back. Now Black has to move the pawn up the board, and now bishop c6, you can see the b pawn is targeted, and of course that can't move forward because the bishop will be on prise. Nakamura has to defend, and now d5. Carlsen was making these moves pretty quickly. You can see the huge difference between these two bishops. That bishop on c6 pressures b5. It also controls e8. That's very nice, which shuts down a potential avenue for Black's counterplay. So really Carlsen's starting to take control in this position, and he starts to edge up the board. Now here, and over the next few moves, bishop a7 is possible. Carlsen has to make a decision when to kind of make the breakthrough, but for the moment he just advanced his pieces up the board. He didn't rush things. Now king e4, that steps out of potential pins on the c-file and protects the d pawn. And now here is where Carlsen decided to make the break. I think it this was actually the time to play bishop a7. He had this possibility over the last few moves, and I think this is the best moment for it. So if rook a8, well, you don't need to take that straight away. You could just play bishop b6. This must be good for white. So rook c8. Bishop b6, this is the point. So now the bishop simply attacks both of these. If the bishop blocks, then we have c4, and that pin is going to win a nice pawn for white. Check. Well, if this is taken, then the rook can come across and give a check, but king f3 just keeps the king out of the way. Again, bishop c7 isn't too good, so black would sack and exchange, but this must be very, very good for white. So clear exchange up, slightly strange position with black having the two bishops, but you know, black has some security on the queen side, but still, I think once the rooks come into play, and at some moment, bishop b4 at the right moment, this must be very, very good for white. I'm going to guess there are difficulties if this bishop on a4 manages to get back into play to hassle white's king, but should be good for white. Instead, Carlsen chose c4, which also looks incredibly strong. I suspect that Carlsen was well aware of bishop a7, but just thought c4 was a much stronger move. But Nakamura does a very good job here of creating complications. First of all, he played bishop b4, which, I mean, it looks a really strange move, but of course gives the b5 pawn some protection. It's tempting for white to play c5 here. Now, it does look extremely odd with black's pawns and bishops like this, but after rook c8, it's actually not easy for white to advance those pawns. One of my colleagues at Chessbase, Alejandro Ramirez, suggests g4 in this position to maintain control. As we'll see in a moment, f5 can give counterplay. g4 is also interesting. Carlsen played instead bishop a7, which at first glance looks really, really strong, but f5 check is a very nice move to give black some counterplay. If king takes, then bishop c3, and this check is rather annoying, and then rook e8 check. Well, after these trades, white is definitely still better, but I think with this position, with bishops of opposite colour, yep, the d-pawn is still some kind of a threat, but I feel that black has reasonable drawing chances. Instead, Carlsen played king f3. Well, it's a much cleaner move somehow, just stepping out of any trouble. Rook c8 must be played. Now it's starting to get messy. Carlsen took on b5, and now here is the idea. Nakamura exchanged, took on b5, and then played bishop c3. So he's managed to exchange off some pawns. Now we're getting to a very technical phase, and it's difficult, very difficult in a practical game to understand which is the best way to go. It's possible to play like this. Carlsen, of course, has to give back in exchange. And this looks a bit weird because this is a very strange self-pin. But it should be possible to play bishop b6 at some moment and remove the bishop. Of course, black can exchange rooks. Whether that's a technical win is hard to say. Some winning chances there. Instead, Carlsen played rook b1, which also didn't look bad. So Nakamura manages to get rid of that dangerous central pawn. And now here, Carlsen played bishop e3. I thought he should have played bishop a4 to keep rooks on the board. But this is a very tricky position. I can understand why he didn't do this, because suddenly white's king lacks a little bit of protection. So, for example, here, and yeah, suddenly this isn't a Carlsen kind of position. He doesn't like it when, you know, his king is under a little bit of fire. You need to tread really delicately to make something of this position, and it can go very badly wrong. But if white wants to win, then keeping his rook on the board could be the best chance. But I can understand, very tricky position. Instead, Carlsen played more pragmatically with bishop e3, but that did mean that Nakamura is now able to trade rooks. Okay, a little tactic. Black takes on b2, and that's check. Now here, if this pawn disappears, if white manages to win the a pawn, then there could be some winning chances with this 3 versus 3. But winning that a pawn is very difficult. These bishops don't have solid protection but with a pawn, and it's very hard. So white's only winning idea is to bring the king over towards the queen side and somehow manage to get that pawn. But Nakamura plays well, his rook is active enough. That pawn can't go any further, but white still has to be a little bit careful. It's difficult to hold everything together. And here we get to crunch time. So the king comes across. In fact, I don't really see how white can make progress after rook b8, just keeping the king shut out. Instead, Nakamura played rook e1, which is also actually a very practical move. Okay, there are threats to bring the rook up. So Carlsen played bishop e3, and this was Nakamura's idea. In playing like this, he's able to force an exchange of pawns. So g takes f4 can be met by rook h1, and that's definitely fine for black, winning that h-pawn. So bishop f4 is necessary. Now Nakamura gives the a-pawn, but manages to take this f-pawn. So now it's just 2v2 on the king side. There are a few practical chances for Carlsen, but actually it's not that difficult for the rook to defend this position, and Nakamura did a very good job. Although Carlsen tried, but 43 moves later, on move 95, they finally agreed to a draw. So, tough game, that one. Tough for both players. Nakamura in some trouble, but Carlsen didn't quite get it right, and I think of the two players, I think Carlsen will be the least satisfied after that game, because I think he will have realised that he had pretty good winning chances, but didn't quite take the right path. So going into the last round, Aronian still leads by a clear point. All the games were drawn, so the positions in the tournament table haven't changed at all. So Aronian 5.5, and then Giri, Vachier-Legrave, Grishuk and Carlsen all on 4.5, a point behind. In the last round, Aronian has black against Topalov. Now that's not an easy last round pairing. You just need to draw. But Topalov, very tough opponent, will always go for it. So the tournament certainly not over yet.